Historical U.S. minority figures. Booker T. Washington, educator and civil rights activist. Born on April 5, 1856, to slave mom Jane and an unknown white father in Halesford, Virginia. After the Civil War, Washington put himself through school and became a teacher with the help of General Samuel C. Armstrong, his mentor. In 1881, the Alabama legislature approved $2,000 for a colored school, the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, now known as Tuskegee University, where General Armstrong recommended Washington to run the school. Washington put his own beliefs into the school's curriculum, teaching African Americans that success would take time and subordination to whites was a necessary evil until African Americans could prove themselves worthy of economic and political rights, which he made clear in his Atlanta Compromise. The Tuskegee School focused more on teaching trades rather than other aspects of education. With the aid of ghostwriters, Washington wrote 5 books. In 1901, President Theodore Roosevelt invited Washington to the White House to dine, making him the first African American to receive the invitation. Both Roosevelt and his successor, William Howard Taft, used Washington as an advisor on racial matters, partly because he accepted racial subserviences. Just before his death in 1913, Washington had lost much of his influence as the idea of racial integration and African American equality was on the rise. By the time Booker T. Washington died on November 14, 1915, the Tuskegee School had 100 well-equipped buildings, 1,500 students, 200 member faculty teaching 38 trades and professions, and a $2 million endowment. W.E.B. Du Bois, educator, civil rights activist, and journalist. Born on February 23, 1868 in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, a predominantly European American town where he freely attended school with whites. In 1885, Du Bois moved to Nashville, Tennessee to attend Fisk University, where he had his first encounter with the Jim Crow laws and began analyzing the issues of American racism. After graduating with a bachelor's from Fisk, Du Bois attended Harvard University, where he earned his master's and was then selected for a study abroad program at the University of Berlin. In 1895, Du Bois became the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard University. Du Bois published the first case study of an African American community, the Philadelphia Negro, a social study, beginning his writing career. Du Bois grew nationally when he publicly criticized Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise, criticizing Washington for not demanding equality for African Americans instead of stating that African Americans should be subservient. In 1909, Du Bois co-founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and served as an editor of its monthly magazine, The Crisis. Du Bois also helped organize Pan-African Congresses to free African colonies from European powers. Du Bois died on August 27, 1963, one day before Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Maya Angelou, civil rights activist, author, poet, and activist. Maya Angelou was born on April 4, 1928 in St. Louis, Missouri. She moved to Arkansas as a young child where she experienced racial prejudices and discrimination. During World War II, Angelou moved to San Francisco, California, where she won a scholarship to study dance and acting at the California Labor School. During the mid-1950s, Angelou's career as a performer took off where she performed in operas and off-Broadway productions and released her first album. During the 1960s, Angelou spent much of her time abroad, living first in Egypt, then in Ghana, working as an editor and freelance writer. In 1969, Maya Angelou published a memoir about her life experiences, I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings, which made literary history as the first non-fiction bestseller by an African-American woman. Angelou also wrote books focused on her life and being African-American and her time in Africa. She is the first African-American woman to have her screenplay produced for the 1972 film Georgia, Georgia. On April 4, 1968, a close friend of Maya Angelou, Martin Luther King, was assassinated on her birthday, and Angelou stopped celebrating her birthday for a few years but sent flowers to MLK's widow for more than 30 years. Maya Angelou died on May 28, 2014, her passing affecting many. Ruby Bridges, civil rights activist. Ruby Bridges was born on September 8, 1954 in Tylertown, Mississippi to sharecroppers Avon and Lucille Bridges. When Bridges was 4 years old, her parents moved to New Orleans, hoping for a better life. While in kindergarten, Ruby was one of many African Americans chosen to take a test determining whether or not she could attend a white school. In 1960, Ruby Bridges' parents were informed by officials from the NAACP that she was one of only 6 African Americans to pass the test and will be the first African American to attend a segregated school in the South. After much pushback from the Louisiana state legislature, designated schools were finally integrated in November of the school year. On November 14, 1960, Ruby Bridges was escorted to William Frantz School by 4 U.S. federal marshals ordered by the federal district court judge. Ruby was met with tough crowds of white parents threatening and throwing things at her. The tension did not ease on, and Ruby was left to be taught as a single student by one teacher because families pulled their children from the school. Ruby being the first African American to attend a segregated school in the South, although she did not know it at the time, was a powerful and important time in civil rights history. As a child experiencing the hardship, U.S. Marshal later said she did not cry or whimpered. She just marched along like a little soldier. Bridges went on to graduate from a segregated high school and later founded the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance, respect, and appreciation of differences. Through education, the foundation seeks to end racism and prejudice.